Hi, I'm Jason Hooper from FixYourGut.com, and this week I'm going to be reviewing the Elimination Diet. Now, until recently, the Elimination Diet is something that I've never really done myself, but I've coached a lot of people through it. And I had a client that was like, just asked me, hey, have you ever done the Elimination Diet before? And I was like, no, I haven't. Well, why not? Because I never really had any reason to do it. And throughout the coaching session, they kind of convinced me that maybe it's something that I should do to help clients so I could have some experience with it myself and have more empathy for people who are going through this process. So if you think of it sort of like an orthopedist, you ask the orthopedist, well, have you ever casted your leg before? Well, no, I've never had a broken leg. Well, maybe you should. Maybe you should cast your leg so that you know what it feels like to have a cast on your leg for 6 to 8 weeks, and then you can help your patients better. So that's what I did over the course of 10 weeks. I did a 10-week elimination diet. I'm going to show you what I did, the results that I got, and sort of the mechanism and the idea of why we do things in a certain order and how to troubleshoot and what we're looking for. So would I recommend that just anybody go through the elimination diet? Well, right off the bat, no. If you're not having any issues, there are certain risks involved with this diet, and you can mess up your gut by doing this. The idea with food sensitivities, food allergies, or whatever they want to call it, which aren't really allergies, by the way, it's an issue with the microbiome and or the mechanics of the GI. It's not something that you're necessarily allergic to. Now, there are people that are allergic to foods, don't get me wrong, but the idea is that if you're sensitive to a food and you avoid that food, it's going to increase your sensitivity to that food, not decrease it. So this is simply a troubleshooting process, not necessarily something that everybody should be doing out there. And to be honest, it took a lot of discipline and it wasn't a whole lot of fun. So I'm going to be reviewing this diet, showing the pros and cons of how it works, and show what you need to do if you need to go through a diet like this to solve a certain gut health issue or troubleshoot a certain gut health issue. One of the reasons why I was able to do this diet was because of this global health issue that we're all having that shall not be named, because I don't want this video to become shadow banned or deranked, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. If this is in the future, check the date, you'll see what I mean. And because of this global health issue, there have been less social gatherings. I stayed home during the holidays. I wasn't going to parties or anything and being tempted by tasty pies all the time. And so I was able to do this 10-week program because I didn't have that social pressure. So not everything that's happening with this global health issue is negative. In fact, there's a lot of opportunities that we can look for in this situation, and this is the one that I found, so that I could complete the elimination diet without becoming a social pariah. So the issue, again, is that, yes, I was able to avoid eating tasty pies and cookies and treats and all this other stuff, but that is not the goal. The goal is to get your gut to where you can eat those tasty pies. Not every day, but if you eat a slice of pie, it shouldn't send you into a coma. It shouldn't completely deteriorate your health. You should be able to eat any food and be able to bounce back from it, or not even bounce back. You just shouldn't have issues with it in the first place. Yes, you want a good lifestyle. Yes, you want a good core diet, but you should be able to go to a party and eat chips and not, break out into hives afterwards. That shouldn't be something that has happened to anybody, and hence the elimination diet. This is what we're going to do. So a long time ago, I used to work for a company called Creative Labs, and Creative Labs was a tech company, and they made products like Sound Blaster. They made some of the very first sound cards for computers that did MIDI processing, and played the Doom games, the Wolfenstein games. Played those better. And I worked in the test lab. I worked for their Cambridge audio divisions for some pretty high-end speakers that we were testing and implementing. But I also, everybody was required to work in support. That was one of the requirements to work there, is no matter where you were in the company, you had to take calls, because they wanted us to be engaged with the customers. And I think that's a good thing. and I learned some troubleshooting skills, what to do when a computer's not working. And so the elimination diet is very similar to troubleshooting a computer. When the computer's not working, you take away all of the things that you don't need, and you start with the bare essential, and then like the processor, the CPU. You plug in the CPU, see if it posts, or maybe even sometimes without the CPU and just see if it's the motherboard. And then you start adding components until you figure out what the problem is, and then you can solve the problem. So that's the idea behind the elimination diet. It's a troubleshooting mechanism. It is not a diet to be sustained for long periods of time. If you are a vegan, don't worry. There is a vegan version of the elimination diet. I don't hate on vegans. I coach a lot of vegans to have better health. In fact, the vegan diet, the vegan version of the elimination diet, is faster. It speeds you up through the process because you're not eating meat or dairy. So you're just troubleshooting some of the vegetables and different things that you're eating. And so that gets you through the diet actually quicker. Again, I got some hate in my last video. I'm not against vegans or the vegan diet. I think the vegan diet is far superior to the American Standard diet. I'm just against the vegan idealism and propaganda and some of these health claims that I don't think are necessarily substantiated by the vegan diet. For instance, like saying you can reverse your heart disease within 72 hours, I think is completely nonsense. And in fact, people have been convicted by courts because they're making these claims. But anyway, I'm going to go over the standard way to do this diet first with meat and dairy, and then afterwards I'll show you the modifications on how to do it the vegan way so that you can troubleshoot maybe if you're having issues with this. Now, I highly recommend that you don't do the elimination diet all by yourself, that you just try it. I definitely recommend working with a health coach, working with your doctor, working with a nutritionist, somebody that understands you and understands what you're doing and understands why you're doing it in the first place. Those are pretty key issues. And maybe even somebody who has some of your lab work and can do blood tests, urinary tests, whatever, to figure out what exactly is going on. That really helps too. So don't try to do this on your own. You really need to have somebody supervising you through this, especially, I think, the vegan way, because the vegan way is actually going to start off with a 5-day water fast. And I think that those fasts would be a good idea if you had supervision through those. Yeah, everybody fasts and they do it all the time. I understand that, but we're not just trying to stay alive here in our Fix Your Gut community. We're trying to optimize. That's part of what we do, and part of optimizing means having somebody look at what you're doing and making sure that they're verifying that the things that you're doing are right and that you're not just in the spiral of confirmation bias, just doing whatever. So how challenging was the elimination diet? For me, it actually wasn't that bad, given the global health situation. It wasn't all that bad. I had some things going for me, though, that made it easier. I had a coach. I had the best health coach on the planet, actually, John Brisson. If you're interested in health coaching with John, go to fixyourgut.com, sign up for the health coaching with John. His rates are pretty reasonable, and he's the best at what he does. Absolutely the best. There's nobody better. So how challenging was it? Not that challenging, because also I can cook fairly well. And I'll be showing you some of the things that I was cooking during this process to make it easier. If you're eating food that's tasty, it's a whole lot easier to eat some of the same foods over and over again if you know your way around the kitchen or around the grill. I've been considering posting some cooking videos, how to improve the taste of your food while maintaining a healthy lifestyle. If you're interested in some cooking videos where I can show you some tips and tricks on how to make tasty food, post below in the comments section if that's something that you'd be interested in. Or maybe if you have a certain recipe or certain types of food that you would like to see cooked and have the taste improved, that would definitely give me some ideas on where to start with that. Maybe I'll do a whole cooking series or something along those lines. But yeah, tasty foods definitely make it easier. And but you have to be careful with your spices, because some of the spices that you might use, if you put paprika, or if you put cayenne or something, those might contain some of the alkaloids that we're going to be talking about later, and it kind of might mess up your data. So you got to be careful with the spices that you're using. The very first thing that I started with, just salt and pepper, classic Texas barbecue. I'm from Texas. That's how we do barbecue here, and we enhance the flavor of the meat by the way we cook it, not by adding all this extra stuff to it. Salt and pepper is all you need for good Texas barbecue. So yeah, the other thing that really helped me with this diet is that I've coached people through it. I know this diet inside and out. I know what things could happen and how to fix them. And so if you're new to this, you have no idea what's going on, I'm going to try to walk you through this also, so that if you have problems in this while you're doing this, you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. That's what's happened to me, and that's kind of how we can solve it. So let's start with week 1. Week 1 is chicken. And this is going to be the toughest week for a lot of people, because you're going to be eating chicken every day for a week. And that's going to be rough. I recommend that you use the fattier cuts of chicken, the dark meats, the chicken thighs, the leg quarters. You could do drumsticks. And I've got a pretty good pellet grill. I've got a Green Mountain grill. They're not a sponsor. I just really like them because it has a cold smoking feature, which I really like. I can cold smoke and sous vide stuff later, or I can cold smoke a lot of cool stuff on the grill. I really enjoy the flavor that I get from the different pellets that I can use, the different hickories and mesquites and all that. Kind of vary those flavors to get that meat to taste different, so I don't get that palate fatigue of eating chicken every single day for an entire week. But again, just the spices, salt and pepper, that's all I use. And I cook it in a certain way to where if the skin is on, like here's some chicken thighs that I cooked, and I left the skin on, I can crisp up that skin, give it a good texture. There's a lot of macronutrients in the skin. And so if make sure you can get enough fat in your diet, because eating chicken breasts for an entire week, I'm not really sure. That's going to be really difficult to get all of the calories that you need to sustain yourself. And the flavor is going to be really boring too. So again, you can get a whole bag of chicken quarters dirt cheap. I'm talking about under $1 a pound for chicken quarters. It could feed your whole family for a week. So this is also going to save you a lot of money if you do it this way. For these chicken quarters that I have right here, I did take the skin off, but I seasoned them really well, made them nice and tender, and they came out really tasty. So yeah, you can cook your food, make it taste really yummy, helps you get through this week a lot better, and it's going to help you get through a lot of this stuff, because we're going to be using chicken, and a lot of our meals coming up. So learn how to cook chicken. It really makes it easier. So the first thing in week 1 that you might experience, and this is going to kind of be similar to the caveman diet or something like that, where you just eat meat all the time, is you might start to experience protein fermentation. And what this is going to look like is that undigested protein is going to get all the way through the small intestines and into the colon, large intestines and colon, undigested. And that's going to cause issues. And a lot of times we're going to see diarrhea with this. We're going to see upset stomach, we're just going to see disaster pants, because again, the protein's not being digested, and it's really bad when protein escapes the small intestines without being digested. And that's not a good thing. So this is a disagreement. I don't recommend the caveman diet. The caveman diet is essentially an elimination diet where you never get out of the meat phase. You're staying in the meat phase indefinitely. And a lot of people are using it to cure their rheumatoid arthritis or other autoimmune systems, but they don't understand the problem. And again, going back to the fundamentals of the elimination diet, is not to avoid foods forever. It's to figure out what your problems are and fix those so that you don't have to eat only meat for the rest of your life without having your joints in pain or something like that. You figure out what's going on inside of your gut. So if you follow the Joe Rogan podcast, which I do, big fan of Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan talks about his experience. He went on the caveman diet for 30 days. So he kind of did week 1 and week 2 of this diet for 30 days straight. And he said, the reason why I can't stay on this diet is because I get diarrhea and it's really bad. Well, yeah, Joe Rogan, he works out a lot. He has high motility. And so he already has a fast-moving digestive tract where the food's already going through, and now he's consuming large amounts of protein. And so the protein may be going through without getting digested, hitting the large intestine, and then, he has to evacuate because of that. And when the large intestine, colon get evacuated, it's like a siphon. It's pulling everything else through. So it's increasing the motility even more. And then we ended up with dysbiosis, where we have bacteria that's in certain areas that aren't supposed to be there. Because another thing that happens is once we get that siphon effect and everything starts to come out really quickly and everything kind of comes down like a water slide, well, there's a rebound effect where the small intestines, large intestines relax. And so then foodstuffs come up through the sphincter back up into the small intestine, and we're getting bacteria from the large intestine, colon. They're working their way back up into the small intestine, and that should not be happening. And that can cause certain forms of SIBO. So we don't want that. We can end up with what's called hydrogen dominant SIBO, and that's not a good thing. So I believe that just from listening to the Joe Rogan podcast when he's talked about this, that was the issue that he had, was with protein fermentation. The other thing that Joe Rogan does a lot is that he does intermittent fasting. So with intermittent fasting, you're eating in a smaller food window. So you're fasting through the morning and sometimes into the afternoon, and then you eat big meals. Well, consuming large amounts of protein, if you're only eating protein, you might not have the digestive enzymes or the pepsin built up in your GI to be able to handle those loads, and then you're not digesting the protein again. It gets into the large intestine. And this is a disagreement that I have with Dr. Rhonda Patrick, which is somebody who I really respect, and I think she has great content out there. She has a different take on the caveman diet and sort of what's going on here. The issues that I see with it are different than what she's saying. And, we have a different background. She has a research background, and I sort of have a health coaching background. So maybe this is why we're seeing things from a different lens. And I don't think that she's wrong and that I'm right necessarily. I think we're looking at things from a different way. I'm just seeing like what the general public is experiencing whenever they try the caveman diet and they break their gut, and then they have to come to me for coaching to figure out what went wrong and how to get them back into health. So what I'm actually seeing is rhodocytomas, bacterial overgrowth. And rhodocytomas starts to overgrow in the large intestine, and then it kind of spreads. And basically the mechanism that's happening here is that in the Krebs cycle, you're seeing pyruvic acid that gets biochemically transformed into oxaloacetate. And what's happening is the rhodocytomus is within its own genome has difficulty doing that, and so it ferments the protein in order to create that transfer of energy in the Krebs cycle. And so if you're able to do things to speed up that transition from pyruvic acid or pyruvate to oxaloacetate, that's not only going to increase your mitochondrial function, but it's also going to help solve that problem to where the rhodocytomus is not going to become opportunistic. So that's what I'm saying. It's a little different than Dr. Rhonda Patrick's take on it. So, listen to both ideas and see which one, if you're having issues with this, see which one is affecting you. But anyway, yeah, high motility issues, people with high motility are really going to have an issue here with week 1 and potentially week 2. So let's talk about week 2. Week 2. In addition to chicken, you're now able to eat red meat also. So why do we not just eat all the meat that we want to in week one? Well, chicken is fairly safe. There are some issues that we can have with, and I should have mentioned this from the beginning, like some of the collagens in the chicken. We avoid the joints, the chicken joints, because they're high in sulfur and certain types of collagen. And it actually is probably going to be a good idea to avoid the chicken skin as well, which I didn't do. But in my case, I don't have an issue with protein fermentation, so I didn't have to worry about that. But I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning. Not to, you might want to avoid the skin if you really want to really be accurate with this diet. So there's an issue with red meat called alpha-gal syndrome, and alpha-gal syndrome is is a disease that makes you extremely sensitive to certain proteins in red meats. And they believe that this comes from something called the Lone Star tick right here in Texas. Unfortunately, also with our Texas barbecue, which is very red meat focused, especially beef focused, whereas in the rest of the South, they tend to do more with pork, the pork ribs and all that kind of stuff. We tend to focus more on, the briskets and all that fun stuff. So with the Lone Star tick, it bites you, you get infected, you develop alpha-gal syndrome, and then adding the red meat after a week of only eating chicken will increase your sensitivity to the red meat so that you can see if this is affecting you. So what are you going to be looking for here? You're going to be looking for first skin issues. Is your skin drying out? Some people have eczema. Some people get dandruff really bad. Those are sort of the issues that you might start seeing if you have some of the basic symptoms of alpha-gal. Now, if it's more advanced, we're going to start to see upper respiratory issues. We're going to start to see runny nose, sneezing, that kind of stuff, like with the sinuses. Maybe even some inflammation in the sinus cavity. If it's more of a severe cases, we're going to start to see more anaphylactic type situations with the swelling of the lips, maybe some itching in the mouth and throat area, maybe swelling there too. But just locally, wherever that red meat is touching, is contacting, we are starting to see some irritation show up in regards in relation to like the swelling, inflammation, or itchy scratchiness type of feeling. And that can progress all the way into actual anaphylaxis, where people have anaphylactic shock, where they need to have epinephrine administered and get to the emergency room as soon as possible because the airways are closing and they're not going to be able to breathe. So that probably won't happen just after a week off if you've never had issues with red meat before, but you might want to consider having your phone nearby, getting ready to call 911 if you haven't eaten red meat in a while and then you eat it. For most people, I don't think it's an issue because most people don't eat red meat every day anyway, and you've probably gone a week without eating red meat before and then eating red meat, and it was no big deal. So let's go on to week 3. Leafy greens. This is where we can start adding some fiber in the diet, which is going to add some relief, especially for people who have higher motility, and it's going to help regulate the motility because now we have some water-soluble fibers and water-insoluble fibers. And it just, for me at least, going to this week 3 just felt so good to finally be able to eat some vegetable matter in there and some fiber. It was just like, yeah, I made it to week 3. This is great. I started eating stuff, leafy greens, your spinaches, your Swiss chards, all that stuff. And right now, all that stuff is coming in through my garden right now at home. So it's basically free food for me anyway, so I can eat all this stuff, and it's delicious and tasty. If you haven't had fresh leafy greens come right out of the garden, arugula, your different types of dark lettuces and stuff, it's so much more flavorful coming out of your garden than it is from the store. I find a lot of the salad type mix bags from the store to have very little flavor and just doesn't taste good, and it's just not very satisfying. It's also lower in phenols, so it just doesn't really taste all that good, and it's not as nutritious as well. Some of the spiciness, I guess, especially from stuff like arugula, maybe your romaine lettuce, it some people are offended by those flavors. Like they don't like the spiciness. They want all their food to taste like water. I'm not really sure why, but I've developed an appreciation for those. In fact, I've had it from the beginning. I like my food to have flavor. So yeah, it was so rewarding to be able to make it to week 3, and much easier to continue the diet after week 3 for me as well. So in week 3, we're going to be looking for issues with oxalates, especially if you're eating spinach and really all of this stuff. So with spinach, or with oxalates in general, you can have crystallization of the oxalates that can cause problems. And oxalates can also turn into other salts as well. There's a mechanism that can transform oxalic acid into uric acid as well. So you could also end up with stuff like joint pain for sure. And a lot of people will tell you when they cut oxalates out of their diet that they start getting joint pain, or sorry, not that they start getting joint pain, but their joint pain is relieved after they cut all that stuff out of their diet. Kidney issues could be a big thing. You know, people could develop kidney stones because of oxalates. With this one, there is a genetic predisposition that many people have to oxalates and even vitamin C that can cause kidney issues. And we can do things to help tweak the gut to prevent that from happening, break down those oxalates and turn them into calcium oxalate instead of oxalic acid, so that it crystallizes in the gut first and can be passed through instead of crystallizing in the blood where the kidneys are removing it and it's causing blockage and kidney stones and that sort of stuff, which you don't want. We can fix some of that stuff, but for people that have that genetic thing, they're probably going to want to avoid oxalates in general. This is one of the few items where, well, that and the red meat, if you end up with, the alpha-gal syndrome, you probably have to end up, unfortunately, not eating as much of that either. But we can get your body to a point where if one day you go out and eat, stuffed mushrooms at a party and it has like the spinach inside of it, and you eat one of those, you're not going to be dying the whole next day because of oxalate crystals that are forming, or the uric acid crystals that are forming in your blood. You're going to be more resilient. You're going to be able to get through it. And again, just being able to cook tasty food and knowing how to prepare these leafy greens makes a huge difference. And here's a dish that I created that has some kale, which technically is a brassica, but in this I lump it in as a leafy green because functionally it functions more as a leafy green than a brassica in this diet plan. So that's something that I recommend, and that can be pretty tasty. All right, so in week 4, we're going to start including brassica vegetables. And these vegetables are going to include broccoli and Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, lots of tasty foods. And I was really excited to make it to week 4 because now I could start doing stir fries, which are really easy to put together. Throw it in a wok and just stir fry it up. And I was also allowed to, well, not really allowed to, but it was easier to start using leaner cuts of meat because with the stir fries, you can start using cooking oil like high oleic peanut oil. And I like the high oleic peanut oil because going from all of the omega-6 that I was getting from my chicken, now I'm switching to a fat that's a lot lower in polyunsaturated fats and a lot higher in monounsaturated fats. And it's also good to have a cooking oil that has the monounsaturated fats because your smoke temperature goes way down and you can cook at a higher temperature, and that gives the al dente type bite to the vegetables that you're going to be eating, like the broccoli. I don't like eating mushy broccoli, mushy cauliflower. That's gross to me. I liked it to still have a bite to it, still have a crunch to it, but not also completely raw. So also when you start cooking and stir fries and stuff, it will break down some of those oxalic acids as well. So we've already made it through leafy greens to test to make sure that we had the oxalic acids. We made it through there, or we didn't, and we're figuring out what's going wrong and fixing it. And then we're now able to go into brassicas. So with brassica, we're going to be looking for the influence of sulforaphane in the body. So these are sulfurous molecules that can cause SIBO-C, which is methane dominant SIBO. And with this, you're going to see a lot of gas and bloating, stomach aches, cramps, pain, like it just feels like something's really going wrong here or there or something like that in the small intestines. So in week 4, basically, we're testing to see how we do with those sulfur compounds that are in vegetables and how to troubleshoot and make sure that we're getting through there. So week 5, we're going to start adding starches. Now, a lot of people will put white rice in week 1 also, because white rice has very little resistant starch and breaks down into glucose. However, I kind of tend to be a little bit more cautious about that, because if the rice cools down or if it's reheated or anything like that, it can crystallize into resistant starch. So it's not necessarily going to be 100% resistant starch free. And I think that week 5 is a very, very important week to start to see how you handle resistant starch. So for here, we start adding white potatoes and rice, which again, these are foods that are very good in making you feel full, that have high satiety. White potatoes are great because the calorie to satiety ratio is one of the best that's out there. White potatoes are one of the best weight loss foods around. Because they make you feel full and they don't really have all that many calories. So this was definitely a good week to get to. Now, this is very important, especially for people that have arthritis and joint pain, because they could have Klebsiella overgrowth, and Klebsiella loves resistant starch. So you're basically using this as a diagnostic tool to see if you've got Klebsiella overgrowth, because when you start eating after 5 weeks, when you start eating resistant starch again, you're going to feel it in a hurry, and it's not going to feel good. So week 5, resistant starch. Week 6, we're going to start to add some tomatoes, peppers, eggplant. So I'm just going to abbreviate it: tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, because I don't want to get too far off frame with this stuff. So yeah, what we're looking for here in week 6 are nightshade alkaloids, and it's not necessarily the nightshade alkaloids that are the issue, it's leaky gut that we're really testing for. So are those nightshade alkaloids escaping the gut? And mechanically speaking, we're basically looking at not only the motility ratios, but the fortitude of the gastrointestinal tract. What is the quality of our mucosal membranes? How wide are our tight junctions opening so that food is getting in and out? Are they protected? Do we have lots of biofilms that have developed so that some of this stuff can transfer? Week 6, again, extremely important. And we're leaving this down here because it takes a while to resensitize to nightshade alkaloids. A lot of people who eat, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, all that kind of stuff regularly, they're just kind of always not feeling good. And so after taking, 6 weeks off and eating it again, you start to realize how not good you feel. So you start including this stuff, you can start putting salsa in on top of a chicken breast or something like that, and it just kind of opens up new possibilities for what you can eat, your chicken and rice and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, week 6, you get to finally add in some of those nightshades. All right, week 7, That's when I incorporate dairy. Some people like to just never eat dairy, which is fine. You can just leave this out. And if you're doing this the vegan way, you're going to skip this step anyway, and you're not going to do this either. So it's going to take that week out for you. If you just don't want to deal with dairy, you don't like dairy, you're just going to, you can completely skip week 7. I don't, I don't like to eat most dairy products. I don't drink a lot of milk. I don't eat a lot of cheese or yogurt, kefir, any of that stuff. It's just it's just not something that I typically use in my diet. I do drink whey protein shakes after I work out. So for me, this step isn't 100% necessary either because there's very little lactose in whey protein shakes, and there's no casein protein. It's all whey protein. So in most dairy products, you have a much higher casein protein ratio than you have with your whey protein. That's why the whey protein isolates and concentrates are way more expensive than your casein protein. And those, if you're drinking casein proteins at night, I think that's just kind of a ripoff through the supplement industry because like they're throwing, like normally when you're making whey protein, you isolate the whey and you're throwing everything else away. Well, now they're selling back to you the stuff that they just isolated and they're making profit on that too. So amazing, right? But no, I don't recommend drinking casein protein. I think that's really bad for you, and you shouldn't do that. If you're interested in having good health and living for a long time, don't drink casein protein before bed. That's, even if you're a bodybuilder or whatever, it's really wrecking your motility, and that's not a good thing for you. So whey protein, is that 100% necessary for me to do? Probably not, but I did it anyway. Started drinking protein shakes again. No big deal. Okay, week 8. Eggs. Now, a lot of people with food sensitivities have sensitivities to eggs. This is one of the big ones. Between eggs and dairy, I would say those are the two biggest things that people have food sensitivity issues with. And with eggs, you're going to be looking for, again, cramping, diarrhea, nausea maybe after eating eggs again. Sometimes you end up with some of the stuffy nose type situation with red meat, but for different reasons. Some of the skin problems too that you end up with red meat, where you start to see dry skin or dandruff or something like that. So those are the problems that you're going to be looking for once you start adding eggs back into your diet again. Now, if you want to, again, with week 9, and this is optional, you can add grains. And with grains, you're going to be looking for potentially some celiac type symptoms, but even if you don't have celiac, you should be also looking for SIBO-C type issues too, where you have the gas, the bloating, the cramps, and the pain, inflammation. A lot of times once you start eating grains again, you want to look in the mirror and start looking at your face and see if your face starts getting puffy, and if it is, then you've got some issues here that you need to troubleshoot and solve. Now again, if you're eating a delicious pecan pie or something like that, well, that's going to have flour and it's going to have grains. So you kind of want to get your body into position where you can eat this stuff without going into complete comas afterwards and being out for 3 days because you ate a slice of pie. That's not a human being should be able to eat a slice of pie every once in a while. That's just how it works. And if you can't, you need to do some work on yourself so that you can. Because it's, and it's not just, well, I could deal without grains for the rest of my life. Of course you could, but you're masking other issues in your gut that need to be solved. So I would recommend that you do week 9 anyway. If you don't want to do that particular thing, if you're just going to avoid grains forever, that more power to you. Okay, if that's your diet plan, you can instead replace grains with stone fruit at this time. So replace your grains with the stone fruits, and what you can then check for in that phase is the different types of pectins and stuff and how they're reacting. Fewer people have issues with that, but when you start checking stone for stone fruit, you'll see undigested pieces of, pear or whatever they're coming out in the digestive tract, plum, something along those lines, and you'll know that you're having some issues with pectin. So you can substitute if you want to, or you can do grain. More people are likely to have sensitivity to grains than they are with stone fruit. And if you want, you can add another week, but 10 weeks is pretty good, I think. Don't really want to go too long in that, because we're already looking at like 2.5 months of elimination diet. That's quite an investment, and people are only going to be able to do this for so long. Now, I saved this one for last, week 10, which is one of the most nutritious foods on this list, but also one of the ones that causes a lot of sensitivity. And that's seafood. And a lot of people have issues with seafood because of the different types of collagen in seafood that are unique, particularly shellfish, but people can also see it in other types of fish too. In shellfish especially, you'll see a lot of undigested food come through. You'll see a lot of protein fermentation, and that has to do with the collagen in the seafood. Again, with when you're doing your supplementation too, people who are sensitive to seafood collagen are probably sensitive to other collagen powders too. So people that are drinking collagen powders, which I don't recommend, I think those are also a ripoff similar to casein protein. I think it's one of the most inferior protein sources that you can eat. It's an incomplete protein. It's one of the very few protein sources that are incomplete. You can go back to brassicas. They have complete proteins. They have all the amino acids that you need to survive. The collagen proteins that you eat, not seafood, but just pure collagen protein powder, doesn't have any tryptophan. You kind of need tryptophan because you need serotonin, and tryptophan converts to 5-HTP and then to serotonin. Okay, so you kind of need that too. So yeah, again, with this collagen fermentation, sometimes your gut isn't set up well to digest these collagens, and then but again, you're at a party, you want to eat some shrimp cocktail or whatever, and you don't want to eat a shrimp and then be in bed for 3 days. Now, again, seafood tend to also be some of the things that people run into, some of the problems that people run into when they have anaphylaxis reactions. It's that and nuts, which are another thing. And notice we haven't gotten to nuts yet. So after week 10, you're just going to start to eat normally again. You're probably going to want to start including some berries, some nuts, not nut butters, but nuts. When you start including those berries again, or stone fruits or whatever, it also you can figure out your fructose sensitivity, which is not usually an issue with a lot of people. And if you're with a good coach, they might restructure this based on what you're experiencing, and they might want to put the fructose a little earlier, or maybe watermelon to see how you're dealing with the sucrose in watermelon, or various polyols. But yeah, when you start opening it up and just being able to eat whatever again, and eat all different foods, if you start running into issues like that, well, then you need to go back to somewhere on this list, probably week 10 or maybe even earlier, to see what your issue was, and then figure out what new food that you start consuming, and basically go through sort of an elimination diet, but with just a whole lot more freedom, so it's not nearly as difficult. So I want to walk you through my experience with this a little bit, just to give you my review. So in week 1, basically what happened is my entire microbiome was being restructured within the period of a few days. In the first couple of days of eating chicken, I was fine, and then by week 3, I started to have some bacterial die-off, and I started to have a little bit of Herx reaction, which I dealt with fairly well. For me, and I go to the gym just about every day. So what happens with me again as I started to develop diarrhea and sort of more of the Joe Rogan-like symptoms with that. And so I had to be able to solve that and regulate my motility back, because if you do this for too long, you can end up with dysbiosis. So I had to be able to use other things to be able to regulate my motility, because you don't want to be having diarrhea. It's really bad for you. And you definitely don't want to have it for too long. With the red meats, by the time I was starting to eat red meat again, uh, I was having no issues with my gut, and I was able to cook tasty food, so I was able to make it through fairly easily. Um, in some of my workouts in the gym, by week 2, I started noticing that some of my heavier lifts, when I was lifting 80 to 90% of my 1 rep max, those were starting to suffer a little bit, because I wasn't getting as many carbohydrates. And so I was able to supplement with some exogenous ketones to try to make up a little bit of the difference, and that turned out to be very helpful. So that's one of the things that I did to help that transition there. Leafy grains, I had no issues with at all. I had no oxalate issues, and I enjoyed eating stuff out of the garden. It was great. Brassicas, again, I didn't have too much issues. I had a little bit of issue with gas at the beginning of just making that transition and rebalancing the microbiome again. And what I did was I took a prebiotic supplement to solve that issue. So with the prebiotic supplements, it has carefully designed saccharides that's sometimes found in breast milk or something like that, that can help feed different types of bacteria that would have been starving off during this process, so that you can start balancing again. So that's one of the ways that I had to troubleshoot in order to get back on track and make sure that everything was good here, and just a few packets of that stuff, and everything was right as rain with me. Starches, being able to eat carbohydrates again was extremely helpful, and I had no issues with the rice. I had no issues with the potatoes at all. I didn't have the joint pain or the Klebsiella type stuff, so very fortunate to be able to go through all that. Nightshades, same thing with me. I've never had the nightshade issues. I don't tend to have a lot of leaky gut issues, because I take care of myself, I take care of my body, and I make sure that my digestive tract is functioning properly at all times, so that I don't end up with leaky gut. With dairy, I just don't enjoy a lot of the dairy stuff, eating the cheeses, and there's a lot of cheeses I just plain don't like. With some of that too, some people run into histamine issues. I did feel a little bit inflamed with some of the casein stuff, just because my body's not used to it, and I just don't eat it a lot. And I think a lot of that, again, has to do with casein being a very difficult protein to break down, and then passing along through to the large intestine, to the colon. And I didn't enjoy that at all. But there, if one thing I could do is try to increase motility again, or use some oil of oregano or something like that. I didn't worry much about it, because there's very few times that I eat dairy. Maybe if I'm at a party or something and they have ice cream, or they have cheese dip or whatever, I'll do that. But I'm not consuming tons and tons and tons of it, like the bodybuilders drinking casein protein shakes at night, or eating a whole pint of cottage cheese, or it's just a small amount, and in those small amounts it doesn't really bother me that much. With eggs, I was absolutely good with eggs. I didn't have any problems there, which is good, because eggs are a cheap source of protein, and they have a lot of fat-soluble vitamins. Yeah, they're a little high in cholesterols, but I think it's actually good to consume dietary cholesterol, because and maybe I should do another video on this, but if you think about if you think about homeostasis, and if you think about entropy, the cholesterols that you're consuming versus the cholesterols that you're making in the liver help to balance each other out. So if you're absolutely eating zero dietary cholesterol at all, you have an imbalance, and that's actually going to create more problems for you than not. So, but that's a gigantic topic, and that's a whole another video or two so we don't have time for that today. But with the grains, again, I don't tend to eat a lot of grains, but you can start eating some things that are made with flour, oatmeals, that kind of stuff. I didn't really have too much issue eating grains, and it wasn't a huge deal for me. But again, wasn't all that enjoyable for me. But like you're watching the game over at your buddy's house, and they have burgers or pizza or whatever. You can't be like, no, I can't eat that because I have this sensitivity. Like, you don't want to be that person. You want to be able to, yeah, sure, I'll take a slice of pizza, whatever. Every once in a while, it's not going to kill you. And it's an opportunity for you to show your resiliency. Then seafood. If I ever developed sensitivity to seafood, that would make me very sad because I love seafood, especially shellfish. I think they're some of the not only the most nutritious foods out there, but I really enjoy eating shellfish. I'm from Louisiana, and so our shrimp, Gulf crabs, blue crabs, crawfish, etouffee, such delicious food. And I really like eating fish too, all sorts of different types of fish. And so that would make me really sad, and if I developed sensitivity to that. Unfortunately, I'm able to process those collagens and break those down. So again, working through with a client on this and being able to figure out what we're adding and the issues they're having, we know we can help troubleshoot what's going on in the gut and then fix that, so that we can end up including more foods. Now, this is sort of like if everything's going perfectly, it takes 10 weeks. If it's not, we might have to stay in a different week for a little bit longer until we solve an issue, and then we start moving on from here. So my review of the diet for me, I don't think it was completely necessary. It did give me, I guess, a greater understanding and empathy for a client that I might put on something like this as a diagnostic tool. Say, like, how difficult was it to eat chicken for an entire week? And then, like, well, what if I couldn't cook? Well, that would be a lot worse. Or with, red meat or whatever, it's like, well, what if I didn't know how to do brisket? That would be a shame. I don't know what I would be eating if I was just like pan frying steaks or something like that. I mean, without the seasonings, it's going to be difficult to get through. All right, so sorry vegans for making you wait a whole till the end of the video to figure out what to do with the vegan diet, but it's actually very similar to this. The only thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this out entirely. We're going to take this out, this out, this out. Okay, so again, this is now going to be, I'm just going to reorder this now. Week 2, 3, 4. That's not right. Sorry. We're going to add, this is actually going to end up being like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we're shaving 3 weeks off. So you're probably thinking like, well, why aren't we shaving 4 weeks off? Because we've eliminated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories, or shaving 5 categories off. Well, we have to add 2 weeks that are special for the vegan diet. So I recommend that you start with a 5-day water fast, which is about a week. That could be your week 1. That might not be in frame. Let me try it here. Water fasting for more than 5 days without medical supervision is not recommended. So 5 days at the most. You might be able to get away with doing it for 3, but it's basically just going to reset your body. And again, all you're doing is drinking water. Now, you don't want to be going to the gym and hitting big lifts. If you're only drinking water, it's going to mess with your blood pressure. You're going to pass out. Make sure that in the water fast phase that you're also including electrolytes. drop a pinch of sea salt into your water and make sure that that water is actually being absorbed. Otherwise, if you're just drinking filtered water, reverse osmosis water, distilled water, you're just going to be peeing it right out and absorbing very little of it. So you need some kind of an electrolyte in order to absorb that water. Week 2 is going to be white rice. And you're going to need to start getting calories, and 100% of your calories are going to be coming through with your white rice. And you can start seasoning it. And on the vegan diet, you can season it with some herbs too, some oregano, some thyme, just to keep it varied, because eating white rice for an entire week could be miserable if you're not doing it so well. You can also add some vinegar to it if you want to. Now you got to pick your vinegar sources carefully. What you're going to want to use is rice vinegar, not the apple cider vinegar, because that could influence your histamine reaction. So every time you make rice, season it a slightly different way. You could even potentially add some, if you get some dextrose, you could add it and make sweet rice or something like that, and that would be fine, because dextrose is the culinary version of glucose. So if you wanted to make like a sweet instead of savory rice dish to help get you through the week, you could definitely do that. Then again, you're going to start adding leafy greens, and you can mix up your leafy greens into the rice, kind of making like a little stir fry. And you can add maybe some olive oil into that and all that kind of stuff. Then your brassicas, and a lot of vegans have issues with brassicas, and they'll find out, oh, I have an issue with sulfur, I need to get this solved, and they'll stop here for a while until they get this problem fixed. Not too many vegans that I've run across have issues with Klebsiella, and I think it's actually because it's through poultry contamination. So that's my theory anyway. I don't have really any proof. There have been some articles that have been written that lead me to believe that, but there's not too many vegans that I've seen that they're going to be having issues with white potato. Nightshade alkaloids could possibly be an issue. And then we just jump into grains, If you wanted to continue it and you wanted to break down other foods like the stone fruits, or if you wanted to check your fructose sensitivity, I don't think, though, you would have become a vegan in the first place if you're having issues with that, because if a banana is going to set you off, you're not likely to be on or to continue a vegan diet. You're probably going to go back on something else because of the discomfort level. So again, it's just like you have to look at the entire pie chart, and it's like, well, how much of society are vegans? And it's a small slice of the pie. And then you have to say, well, why is that? Is it because a lot of people that go on the vegan diet just have not a good time, and so that kind of takes them out of that small slice of the pie into someplace else. And most of the reason why is because of gut issues. So if you are a vegan, been doing it for a while, you're not likely to have those same kinds of issues. So I've walked you through the omnivorous form of how to do this diet and the vegan way of how to do this diet. If you're a vegetarian, you can do something in between, maybe keep the eggs and the dairy. I would not start with eggs and dairy as your protein source. If you're a vegetarian but not a vegan, I would do something like this first and then go through. Please, please, please do not try to do this on your own. Please do not try to be your own health coach. Get somebody else to supervise you through this process. You need another set of eyes on you. You need somebody to look at you and say, hey, you look puffy or something. You don't want just to create this whole system of confirmation bias. You need somebody to be double checking, running a lab if they need to. If you're going to be doing a 10-week, 2.5-month process, let your doctor know that you're going to be doing an elimination diet, and let your doctor know why. And your doctor might try to talk you out of it and say, oh, you don't need to do that, you're fine, whatever, and just say, well, okay, I know I'm fine, but I'm going to do this anyway. I just want to let you know what I'm going to be doing. Okay, because ultimately you're in charge of your own health, and you're the own advocate for your own health, not somebody else. So you have to take that ownership. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can get more. We're putting out new content every single week. And if you like the video, hit like. And if you don't like it, then hit the thumbs down twice, because that'll teach me. All right. Have a good week. We'll see you later.